Hey, Travis here at Exercise Lab with another video for you guys. So I'm a doctor of physical therapy for those who don't know me. Today I want to talk to you guys about a product by Shogun, company I hadn't really heard of much. I developed this Nord-Ex, which is basically a Nordic curl and low back extension combo machine. So here's just kind of a look at it here, just sort of when it's all the way down, and pretty sturdy piece of equipment. You know, you can see the carbon steel that it has on it. It's 126 pounds. It's a pretty robust little piece of equipment for something that's marketed as kind of a home garage gym type of thing. They like to talk about a small footprint that it has, but yet it's industrial grade. So I want to talk to you guys a little bit about that. What is a Nordic hamstring curl for those you don't know, and then maybe why you should be doing them. And if you do want to do them, you know, is this the one that's going to fit the bill for those of you maybe looking to add something to the home or the garage gym? So if you guys want to learn more about this thing, go and stay tuned and we'll get started. All right, so just coming in here, you got your foot plates. You know, your feet go behind these. This is a sort of in flat mode here, what you would do. And if you want to do your Nordic curls, you know, you want to get yourself in here pretty tight. Now this pad actually you can adjust, and I'll show you guys how to do that in a moment. I'm going to go ahead and just show the full-blown method. So I pull this pin and I kind of sit on these to really lock my heels down, because you want to have your heels firmly, you know, planted on this thing. And then from there, you're basically going to just fall forward however far you can and curl yourself back. And that's where this can be advantageous, because sometimes having this pad, because you know, if you don't have the strength for that, you know, perhaps you're going to fall down and then you're going to have to push yourself back up. Now, you know, for those of you who are ready for that, though, sometimes that can be a nice method of just trying to at least control eccentrically, and then maybe you don't have the strength to go all the way down. You kind of give yourself a little push up, a little push, and then you come back and try and do that curl. And so again, this is going to be a big hamstring exercise. It's really a nice way to kind of use a hamstring curl in a closed chain position. You know, most of the time, hamstring curls are known as open chain, when your foot's not really fixed to anything. You know, here I am fixed. And so I'm obviously going to get some contribution from the glutes as well, but it really just dials in those hamstrings, and I'd say more potently than a lot of other hamstring curls or, you know, hamstring exercises that are out there. So when it comes to hamstring exercises, the Nordic curl, the Nordic hamstring curl, I'd say is pretty much second to none. Fantastic exercise. I like doing it all the time. So in that sense, the Shogun, just for that point alone, I'd say is a pretty cool piece of equipment. You know, again, there are other ways to do this. They have, you know, kinds that you can kind of tuck under a door, where you have a little door anchor at the bottom and you try to tuck your feet in. I used a handful of those, didn't really find one I was in love with, which is why I haven't done a video on one yet. This is a pretty cool thing, but again, this is a pretty big footprint. So if you want to do hamstring curls in a garage gym, though, this is going to be one way to do it. Now, the next question is, do I need to add low back extensions? So let me show you guys what that looks like right now. So from here, assuming you didn't pull this pin out to use the assistance for the Nordic curls, you know, if it just looks like this, it's not terribly tricky to adjust it in the other mode. You have some different pins in here, and one of the pins you have to pull, there's a lever on the side that releases it. And then from there, you have to release another pin, which is underneath here, fold this up, and then now this end is going to feed into this guy. And the cool thing is it's labeled, so it actually tells you how many degrees you are, whether it's 35, 40, 45, 50, or 55. And so you just kind of pull whatever angle, you know, that you want. You know, being more vertical would typically be easier. Going down lower would be a little bit harder. And then, you know, from there, you can pull this pin out if you wanted to adjust it, you know, this way. I generally like to have the brake sort of below my hip line. I didn't actually adjust this yet, so you might have to pull this out a little bit to get in here, and then you can sort of tighten it up. You know, again, I'll come in here, just kind of adjust it so my heels are somewhat firmly in there. This one doesn't have to be super tight like the Nordic curls, but you want it to be pretty snug. So again, if you think about kind of where the break in my hip is, you know, I don't want to actually block that at all. So I want to be able to get my, you know, good hip hinge. I don't want to be curling at my back. And so I put this, you know, kind of just below that break. I actually probably could put it one more down. But, you know, you would come down here, you know, do your back extension. You know, you can sort of do it dynamically like that. When you come down, some people like to be up here, but I really don't like to do that just because it's a little more torque on the low back. Across the hands in front if you want, and that's totally fine. You know, again, you could do an isometric here. You know, if you want to sort of preferentially recruit low back, you know, you can try and kind of flex there versus, you know, if you really squeeze and engage the glutes, you know, you can kind of get a little bit more of the glute area when you're doing these. And so nice way to sort of get some back, low back work. Low back, you know, some of those muscles that do get a lot of indirect work. So the question is, do I want to work them directly? I don't necessarily think it's a bad idea, particularly in an endurance type way, just to sort of minimize that fatigue, because a lot of times if those muscles are getting fatigued, then sometimes they're going to, put undue stress on the spine itself, some of those passive structures, ligaments and things of that nature. So, you potentially be more risk of having disc issues. That being said, do you need to do a battery of these? I don't necessarily know about that. Sometimes what you can do is you can come in here at a lower angle. Let me just make sure I've locked that in. And then once you have it locked, and again, this would be somewhat steep, you can just come in here and do an isometric, very much like you would do a plank. Only the difference now is the emphasis is going to be a little more on that posterior chain. As you could come in here and you could do a timed event, sort of like you would do a static plank. And I think that could be a really nice way to get some endurance there without that dynamic movement that may potentially put a little more stress on the low back for those of you who have some concerns there. So again, dynamically for those of you who have a healthy back, maybe not too many concerns, maybe a little more isometrically for those of you coming off low back issues or have more low back considerations. And again, you could just sort of do your hold there. So I like that for low back extension use. And that's why I think maybe the Shogun could be a good device for those of you looking to build up some endurance, strength endurance in those departments. All right, now for those of you who are looking to use this in a way that gives you more assistance on the Nordic curls, what you want to do is you'd want to disconnect those two ends I was mentioning earlier. You can put, or just kind of put this away temporarily, figure out the angle that you want down here now. So there's another pin that you can adjust this, and I can put it, for instance, at that angle. And then now what I've got to do is I've got to pull this thing out of this piece here. So now this end comes out, and I slide that guy down in here. And so now I feed this guy through here. Note again, whatever angle you decide, and again, you could change this angle depending on your abilities. Now you're going to put this thing away. Okay, so I put that thing down there. You can sort of secure that in place if you want, which I would do by pulling that pin. Okay, now it's secured. So now I could come in here the way I showed you guys earlier for my Nordic curls. But now you see I have this pad on the end here. And so if I'm at a place where maybe this is about as far down as I can get, but now I can kind of assist myself back up technically. And again, we're always going to generally be stronger eccentrically than concentrically. So eccentric would be lowering myself down. So maybe I can do that, but then I can't quite get back up. So maybe I'd use a little arms. And you don't want to be extremely ballistic on that, because the idea is you want to get the hamstrings doing as much of the work. So I would say if you're going to use this method, which again, you certainly could, you want to be pretty ginger with the hands, or at least as ginger as you can get away with. And then obviously you want to start getting that angle to be more and more horizontal until eventually you're pretty much all the way horizontal, and then off you go. So if you want to use this, you can. I personally, fortunately, I'm strong enough. I haven't really needed to be up this high. I have sometimes put something on the ground. If you guys have like a Bosu ball or a bench or anything, you could put a lot of different things in front here, something that's sturdy ideally, that you can sort of push yourself back on. I think that's fine too. And sometimes it's just a little bit less of a hassle. It's a little bit of a quicker exchange. Not that that took forever, but for those of you maybe that are trying to go through different exercises quickly, you may not want to pull that pin out every time. So that's just something I found. But again, it is a nicety for those of you who want to do it that way. And so that's how you would use the assist on the Nordic Curl, Nordic Hamstring Curl. All right, so now, last but not least, let me show you guys. I put this away real quick. For those of you who are in the home gym kind of department, maybe you do need to tuck this thing in the corner. Don't have a dedicated space you can really devote to this thing. So what you would do is you would pull this guy out. Then you've got to feed it back into this one, which means you're going to take the old one away. So I'm going to feed it back into this guy here. And again, there's a couple different ways you could do this, but I'm going to try and do a little bit more of the brute force method here. Pull that pin down, and you don't want to pull it all the way down, because then it actually won't close. So that's kind of the little bit of an annoying thing, is you have to pull it up a little bit to give yourself enough clearance. And so I still didn't quite get it right. Hopefully the next one's a charm. I think that's probably going to be too much. So it takes just a little bit of fussing with, but not too much. There we go. Then I got it right. Pull that pin, and now it's locked in place. And so then I would grab this thing, and then technically you can put it away like that somewhere in a corner. But again, 126 pounds might be just a little bit on the hefty side for a few of you, but hey, that's a workout for you as well. All right, so that's my 2 cents for today on the Nord-Ex by Shogun. Pretty cool, nifty piece of equipment. Again, my commentary really is that I think it's great for a garage gym for those of you who have the space for it and are looking to do those exercises. I would say maybe for those of you that are more in a small apartment, home gym type of setup, this thing's a little bit on the hefty side. So it's just kind of funny how this thing's greatest asset's also kind of a liability because, you know, I like the fact that it's strong and it's sturdy, you know, 126 pounds, I think that's great. And, you know, if you guys have the space for it and want to do these exercises, then I think it's a pretty good piece of equipment. That being said, it's probably a little bit too sturdy for some of you, and that's where the liability part comes in. You know, if you're looking to just kind of stuff this thing under a bed or tuck it away in a corner on the closet, you know, technically, yes, you can do that, but it's probably a little bit hefty for you. You know, somebody that's, you know, barely lifting a yoga mat's going to have a hard time, you know, probably putting this thing away, you know, to and fro many times a week. But again, it's there for you if you guys want to try and do that. I personally just have a dedicated space. I leave it. I don't have to, you know, lug this thing around all the time, moving it to and fro. But again, that might not be the situation for everybody. So you have to kind of weigh those pros and cons. And if this thing ends up being too much of a pain to move, the reality is you may not end up using it that much, which would really be a shame because I think it is a great piece of equipment. It's nice job, Shogun. Again, I'm a pretty big fan of this thing. I'm definitely going to try to add some other content on this channel, or maybe I incorporate some band resistance or even band assistance. I can show you guys how to do that as well. And you know, I think it lends itself to that pretty nicely. And I've tried to kind of experiment. I'm sort of tinkering around with that now. Once I get a little more dialed in, I'll let you guys know what I think on that. On that note, I'm going to try to keep good content coming for those of you who like to watch Exercise Lab. Please comment below. Let me know what you guys think. Any new content I haven't covered or topics I haven't discussed yet, let me know as well. And as always, I hope you guys have fun.